CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success. We're rolling.
Okay. The reason I said that it's a good topic for discussion is because I can't tell. Every year I was told to work on my soft skills.
Yeah.
All the time. And if you're a maintenance guy and you're a shop floor person, you've got to survive that cutthroat world, and you've got to survive a world where you have to earn people's respect. And sometimes that means you develop rough around the edges skills.
Well,
And sometimes it's from your upbringing, sometimes it's from your work environment, of places that you worked, there's some boss you had, and there's lots of reasons for it. But ultimately, if you want to become the maintenance manager, or you shift and move to another facility, that's a challenge for people. My wife. I had a conversation the other day with a friend of mine that flew into town to go to the Eagles game with me on Monday, and
sorry, bud. I
like
meant to text you, and I
let's
decided not
go into this
to.
conversation. So he said, I thought you guys grew up across the street from each other. And I said, yeah, we did. And he said, well George, you don't really have an accent compared to your wife. And I tend to jokingly and lovingly tell my wife she has a Phil Billy accent because her name is Billy. And it's more kind of hillbilly-ish Philly the way her twang is. And what I said to him was, I've had to try to flatten my accent, which is still not great. I still say water, but I generally speak with a relatively flat accent on purpose, because I used to travel all over the world and have to speak to people from all different backgrounds. And so you try to kind of flatten your American accent to make that communication a little easier. That's kind of the same thing, but it's with your communication style, or with how you assume someone will take a joke if you're rough around the edges, right? And so folks that are transitioning or want to transition into more of a corporate environment, that's it. It's not. It's not. It requires work. It requires a lot of work. It required a lot of work for me. That's for
Oh,
sure.
well, I mean, and look, off mic, we can really go, and I try to be mindful of that. But when it comes to not just the podcast, but being in the world of CMMS, dealing with companies, working with facilities managers, maintenance and reliability practitioners, all these different people over the years. But then when I get into these corporate environments, and you kind of, like, for me, it's like, okay, I know what we need to do here. I know what we need to do here. I know what we need to do here. And if anybody's wondering why, it's because, well, been through it a lot of times, kind of know where some of the landmines are. Also, like to have a very heightened awareness when to bring in the right kind of experts, where I'm like, all right, I'm out of my depth. I know some of those words, I know some of those terms, and I've seen people do it, I've heard them do it, but we need help here. Or like when you're marketing CMMS software and doing all these things and just missing it, because I've been there and done that. And I'm not saying anything like, well, we always did it that way. I'm saying, what is wrong with you people? Why don't you see what's really going on? And I get so frustrated with here's what it is. In several ways, I hate the game. And at the end of the day, if somebody asked me, I'd say, look, you're not going to change the game. You got to know how to play the game in a way that makes it possible for you to thrive and deliver what you want to deliver. And you got to learn how to tune out that white noise, or, oh, they don't get it. I'm more about, hang on. Look, we need to talk real quick. We need a 5-minute aside so you can get it. But they never do. And they actually know, they hear you, but they won't do it. I hate vanity metrics. I hate bullshit when it comes to, hey, we're going to do this, this, and this. Like I might, back in my days when I was representing a CMMS platform, or if I'm working with someone, I know what I can do. I know what they can do, which is much more important, and how that's going to work.
Yep.
And then all the people around me aren't fucking listening. It's like, what is wrong with you people? That's
And
that's what I
you
was
know,
talking about with the rough around the edges. I'm like, dude, I wear my heart on my sleeve, and if you don't like it, I get it. But
well,
um,
that's also part of it, right? You got to be able to sleep at night. You have to leave with your integrity. So play the game all you want, but you also have to leave with your own integrity. And that can be a balance sometimes between, going off on someone or not, So, Joe, years ago, Joe and I did a presentation called "It's Not You, but It's You,"
okay,
and the premise of the presentation was that regardless of what you're trying to achieve, if it's not working, it's not everyone else's fault. Either you don't understand the audience, you don't know how to communicate to the audience, you don't know what motivates the audience, or you're trying to sell them something they're completely disinterested in for a variety of reasons. E- Either in all of those scenarios, saying my boss just doesn't understand is the wrong answer. That
mhm,
the question, it's not even an answer that you're searching for. What you're searching for is the right question. What you're searching for is, what do I need to do to convey a sense of urgency, to create a sense of urgency? And to do that, you have to understand what motivates the individuals in the room,
mm,
whether it's the safety program or quality or finance or the plant manager. They all have different motivations because they're driven by different objectives. Well, whatever it is you're attempting to achieve needs to perk the ears up of somebody saying, I still need to hit that objective.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
if it
yeah.
doesn't, you're not wasting their time, but you're not helping them either, right? So,
Yeah.
and it's about how do you seek out the right motivation and influence the other person, right? And you influence people by helping them. You influence people by being productive in service of them. And
I'm going to tell you right now, the topic, the concept, all the things around, behind, and involving influence. I'm very passionate about the subject, and that doesn't mean that I'm really good at it, but I can talk about it a lot because it has to do with a lot of the things I learned over the years in school that had, more to do with that human stuff. Shout out
yeah,
to Bob Latino and Ken Latino. Ken hates that human stuff. He doesn't really hate it. He just likes to make fun of it. Um,
I do know
so
what the Latinos like.
there it is. Beer, baby. Beer. Well, so I guess where
Flavor
I'm
Tour.
going, you and I were talking about doing a later in the evening
I thought
show
this
and
was
getting
it.
people on here.
Unless I got the wrong memo.
I don't know, man. We don't have any rules here. We don't have any rules here. Um,
Yeah, your background it has been on, the psychology side of things and reading, studying, all those aspects, right, of human behaviors.
it, it it is, but again, this is another area where I talk about it openly on the podcast now too, where I want people to understand I'm only a certain type of expert, and what's really important about that is you need to know what you know, but you need to also know that there's a lot you don't. And if you go too far, then you could send somebody off on a journey that's maybe got a pretty weak foundation, or it's kind of like a castle built out of sand. So I like to be really careful with that. Some people are like, well, why you talk with a lot of qualifiers? And I say I do that because I really have something something inside of me. I don't even know what the hell it is, wants people to have awareness. I want them to be able to understand things in a way that they could do something with it. I don't want to be um, that person that sends them off on a journey that results in some kind of a catastrophic failure. So a lot of the things I do and the way I think somehow lend themselves well to maintenance environments and, you know, maybe even working in corporate. It's just what happened was I got a little bit too loud over the years, but getting back to, and that's what it really was. It was just not being able to embrace those skills, those uh, abilities that one can develop to be self-aware, do self-work. Shout out to Rob Kavalrowski when it comes to maybe developing influence, because influence, at the end of the day, this is a very simplistic view of it. It's complicated to actually achieve it, but to have influence is to be influenceable, influenceable. You have to allow for influence in order to have influence, and that's as simple as you can probably make it. And there's a lot going on in our heads, in our bodies, all around, in the environment, and all that kind of stuff. But I've got a friend, a very close friend, who told me this really interesting story years and years ago. He had um, he's sitting on the couch, and his son, probably about 5 years old, and he says, "Hey, son, can you grab me a soda, out of the fridge?" Kid says, "No." He's thinking to himself. He's like, "Hmm, why not?" And basically, I'm probably butchering the story. His son says, "Well, we have a right to, make these choices and all these things." And uh, it- something around the Constitution that he sensed. So he says, "Are you guys studying the Constitution in, like kindergarten, first grade?" And kid says, "Yeah." Dad says, "All right." Gets up, walks over to the refrigerator to grab the soda himself, but he looked back and he saw the look on his son's face. And he thought to himself, wow, that worked. Now, what he meant was he allowed his son to have influence. He himself was influenceable. And thus, forevermore, their relationship changed. And then his son, as a man now, 20 some odd years old, expects to have influence, but he gives that same thing. So I'm dancing around it, but the impact of influence is about, it's not about manipulation. It's about giving the other what they want. Therefore, you
Yep.
get what you want. Was that
Oh yeah,
it?
no
Would you
doubt.
see it that way?
Oh yeah, 1,000%. A thousand
So
percent.
now let's weave it in to what we're all playing in, right? So I'm coming from the CMMS side. I'm not a CMRP. I understand some of the concepts in maintenance and reliability, but I think of things building envelope, people. I'm all about people and process. Technology augments that, even though secretly I actually think you can use technology to fix some of your people and process. But we have to be very careful with that. It's not a magic silver bullet.
For sure.
So, how then, when we deal with this same message we all keep talking about, I'm in a facility, I know I've got some problems, I need to connect all the dots, and I need to have influence with upper management or leadership, which they're kind of both different levels of leadership. How do I get them to see what I'm seeing? And how does that show up or not?
Wow, that's a big,
Big.
giant, open question, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's for me, it's a work backwards thing, right? So I don't know. Let's say you need some asset replaced or some remodel done in an area that's dilapidated and they don't want to spend money. So how do you work backwards from getting the project approved? In order to get the project approved, who needs to approve it and what are they motivated by? And how can this project help support their motivations? Because look, at the end of the day, there's only so much money the company has to spend or invest in itself. It's not a infinite black hole full of cash. There's a finite amount of it, and they can choose to spend it in various places and for a variety of reasons that add benefit or not to the business. And they can even choose to not spend the money and make money off of the money. So you have to dig into what motivates the people that make the approval process. You're not fighting against anyone. You're trying to support what they do, and you have to articulate what it is you're looking for in a sense that conveys that. Um, Otherwise, they're going to spend it where it makes sense for them, right? Everybody is self-aware. Everybody knows what their goals and objectives are. And no one is running around the company trying to achieve everybody else's goals and objectives. They're all trying to achieve their own.
Mm.
So if you can take an approach of trying to get yours done, but conveying what you need in a sense of how it gets other people's objectives achieved, it's a win-win. There, we're having an issue right now at a piece of equipment that just has it's not the printer that's a problem. It's the way it's being used and how it was installed and how the stuff was designed, whatever. They need to spend some money to fix it. But it's been like this for years. And no one really saw what the issues were because they were running the unit so slow, it wasn't really noticeable. Well, now we've got the unit running so fast that, we're at its max speed, but still losing about 5 units a minute. And so we're trying to squeeze every drop out of this. But now we're to a point of, well, 5 units a minute. What's 5 units a minute? I don't know. It's like 1.6, 1.7 million units a year at 75 cents a unit. So you're talking about a pretty significant amount of money, 1.1, $1.2 million, something like that, in lost revenue because they won't spend 10 grand to fix it. But they didn't know the math before because it was closed in with all the other noise. And so pulling out all the other noise and presenting a clear, straightforward business case, we need to install these things because it'll make us safer, right? We've had so many incidents, whatever the case may be. We need to do this because it's going to help with product quality. We need to do this because it's going to have a longer lifespan on assets downstream. There's ways to articulate it, and we're not very good at it, generally speaking. But the data to articulate it needs to be in the CMMS. And so here's always the conundrum: you've got organizations that have, we'll say, between 5 and 20 maintenance folks, and I'm not speaking in terms of this is across the board. Certainly not. There are pockets of excellence everywhere. But generally speaking, groups that are of that size don't necessarily see the value of spending the time to properly document everything inside the system. And I see it often. So they're in this catch-22. I don't have the information necessary to convey what I need to convey in order to get what I want to get, but I don't think I have the time, nor do I think it's worth it to document everything that would give me that ammunition to go to the table with. So how do you get past the impasse of the folks that feel like it's a waste of their time to spend the extra effort to fully document something in a system that no one else uses except for them?
Mm. Mm. Important.
And that's their mindset of it, right? No one looks at this, no one cares. Why? Like, it does what I need it to do. They put in something that says, hey George, go fix this. I go fix that. Why do I need to spend all the extra time to be specific around what I did and document the parts and all that other stuff? Why do I have to be accurate in how much time it took when no one else is going to look at it? Well, because it benefits you. That's why. But it's not going to but it's not going to benefit you right away. It's not going to benefit you for 3 to 5 years by the time you put in enough information to start logically using it to make business decisions. It's not 6 months, right? You can't start using the CMMS and 6 months later go, oh, I know exactly what assets to replace based on spend. Not really that quick. So the challenge of any CMMS organization or company, or company that helps others with the implementation of a CMMS, is really that piece of how do you get them to see the light and put in the amount of effort necessary to make it valuable. And that's always the challenge, always.
I
When
have
it
a
comes to
question.
CMMS.
I have a question about that, because if we're talking about this concept of influence, having influence, and we're trying to get things done, we want some buy-in, we want support, all that, and we've got this great technology. Do you think the lack of adoption and utilization, you would say, about the CMMS platform comes from organizational approaches to just checking a box that, yep, we've got a CMMS, we selected one and we bought one, and then that's about it. They just keep doing what they do.
I think it's I guess there's probably a couple reasons why they first seek out a CMMS. One, no one else is on paper doing anything. So why is maintenance on paper doing something? Two, the operation needs a method of calling maintenance without necessarily having a radio. So putting in a work order makes sense. Three, there's some regulatory reason why they have to do that, right? Four, somebody at a conference they saw was using it really well, and so they got excited about it, and then they go shopping. And then they realize what it takes to actually do that, and they probably get scared, and it electronically collects dust.
I I like that. Electronically collects dust, because we've all heard those horror stories.
Yeah, and I don't know. You can be an extremely successful maintenance organization with no CMMS. It is not a requirement. But if you want better information to make better choices and better business decisions, then you certainly need to have and implement one well.
Yeah, and if we hear these same messages over and over and over, and plenty of people on the front lines that are, cold calling people, talking to people. They're going to be at the booths, and a lot of you out there, you got these jobs. That's your job to do. But I, I hope you'll learn more about your clients and what they really care about and what you're trying to solve for. But I think what tends to happen is this idea around leveraging a platform to collect and gather and be a historian of the data that you need in order to have influence. What I'm thinking is the context matters. It has to be the right data. And this brings me back to something you were talking about. I didn't say it in that moment. I'm going to say it now, that too often it's like, yeah, we can have you up and running in, 2 to 3 weeks, and you're going to start benefiting from utilizing the platform very quickly. Well, that needs a qualifier in that you've started. If you start doing that, you've started. That's really good news. You now know some things, but you're certainly not going to develop, like you said, in 6 months, enough data to actually. I just heard something recently. I don't remember who said it. I wish I could, but I don't want to go look it up right now because I'm kind of in this moment where the data points you need for all the current AI machine learning, and it's going to do all this stuff for you, which, by the way, everybody, it's not. It is not. Anybody that wants to come on and talk about that, I want to have that conversation so I can start to change my thinking. I want to give you some influence, right, on how your AI and machine learning is really going to work when you have, let's say, God, this might have been Walker Reynolds. Something about like 400 or 500 data points is nowhere near enough to actually start leveraging that. He talks about like unified namespace and these
Yeah.
things I'm trying to learn about now. And that's who it was. And I think what you really need more ideally is about 10,000 data points. And if somebody doesn't have a CMMS in place, they don't have anything for data collection, it's not being leveraged properly, they don't have enough interest or care. And there's a good reason for that too, by the way, in defense of all the maintenance people, the technicians and the operators. If your leadership isn't using it, why the hell would you? Why the hell should you? Because
Right.
then it's like, I could have been doing something much more productive for my day, like you were saying. But that's why I get worried about all this AI and machine learning stuff. On the other hand, maybe at the surface level, there's some ways to leverage that to help you better use your platform in those early days. But I think we need a lot of context around that too. It's not just hit it and forget it. That's the biggest problem I saw for nearly 20 years when it comes to how people leverage platforms. And then on top of that, you got their vendor like, well, you're not using these 8 parts of the system. Well, the argument on the client side would be, we're not looking at that right now because we are rocking and rolling with what we're using.
Right.
Like if you're doing something simple with your platform, you get a platform in there, and all of a sudden you start using it for a simple concept of plenty of people are going to argue with me about the way I explain this. You're going to have planned downtime, scheduled downtime, whatever the hell you want to call it. Every Friday, we're going to take this line down and we're going to do 2 hours worth of maintenance because it increases our throughput, our production, and our outcomes by 5, 6, 7, 8%. That is typically going to be a monstrous return on investment. And by the way, there's not an ROI calculator out there that will tell you that ahead of time. That's all pie in the sky. The ROI calculator comes after the fact when you have some data to prove it and support it. But I think sometimes people make it too complicated. So now we're spinning out in this conversation where you're always saying, Greg, you're asking a big open question. We could go like 1,000 different directions plus. This is the issue, like that I keep seeing with everybody says this, it's really that. And I get tired of that. And now we come back to the very beginning where I'm like, how the hell do you get through playing this game within corporations where they just keep not seeing maintenance? They know it too. They know that it's not just a cost center. They know it. But when they're behind those closed doors in the boardroom, it's just a cost center.
Well, look, the maintenance department also needs to ask the question, what value are you adding?
To
If all
themselves?
so, all right, so let's say you're in a manufacturing plant. I'm gonna bring up 2 points. The first one is sometimes maintenance doesn't know what data is valuable. If you went to a manufacturing plant and asked the maintenance department how many times they showed up to a production line and did not replace a part, what do you think the answer is?
I I'm thinking it's a lot.
It's a lot. Okay. So, if maintenance shows up to a problem and no part is broken, is there a maintenance problem?
Maybe.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, maybe there's something other than a broken part that needs some maintenance to prevent the part from breaking.
So, if it hadn't broke yet, would the line be down or would it not be running right?
No.
Right. So, they would have never got called. So, so if maintenance shows up and no part is replaced, don't get me wrong, could be an electrical fall, the frayed wire, minor things do happen. But a vast majority of the time, maintenance shows up because the operators don't know how to do standard work. They don't set it up right. They don't inspect incoming raw material, so the machine doesn't accept the raw material and it operates like crap. 1,000 reasons. Maintenance typically doesn't even put that stuff in the system because they showed up for 5 minutes, made a little tweak, and the line started running. Now, the question becomes this. As the maintenance manager, when you go to create a budget and you say, well, I need X, management goes, I don't understand how you need X when you only do 10,000 hours a year in PMs. Why do you need more than the 5, 6, 7 people it takes? And you have nothing. You have a blank slate of a reply because you don't document every time you go help an operator do their job. Or you don't have any data that highlights what it costs in downtime because whoever's responsible for operations doesn't have any standards. So, as the maintenance department, what value are you adding by just constantly going and doing the operator's job, or constantly going to make a machine operate raw materials it was not designed for because they're out of spec? And then the next lot comes in, it's in spec, and guess what you got to do? Go modify the machine again. And
No,
this
that's not.
cycle is constant and constant. And so the catch here is 2 things. One is they're shorthanded because if they base budgeting on how much they spend in parts and how much they do PMs and how much work there is to install those parts, they're missing all the operator help, and so they're already short-staffed. Now, because they're short-staffed, they don't document any of the same stuff that would help them next year to be able to say, yeah, that's great. We've got X amount of PMs and they take that many hours, and we got X amount of this in order to replace parts, and it takes this many hours. But what about all the hours where we go and make your machines operate bad raw material or fix an operator's poor setup? Where's all that time at? And how many people do I get for that? And then all the lost revenue that is associated with that. I mean, one of the largest things we find in a plant is a massive amount of time where maintenance is performing work they should not have to perform if standards existed and people were well trained.
And there was accountability.
Oh, yeah, well, we don't want to jump too far.
Yeah, that's quite an advanced
Let's
concept,
not make that
actually.
many assumptions now, Greg.
That's well, and so all this, if people start to take it in, which takes time, right? You're not going to have 5-minute
Yeah.
conversations and get this stuff done. You should be able to, but in order to do that, you'd be in a plant environment that's already at that pinnacle level of continual process improvement. There you can have 5-10 minute conversations and actually start getting things moving. It doesn't mean that 10 minutes later you're good to go. It's more about you can ignite the fuse about, now we know we've got an action item. It's substantiated by data. It's substantiated by let's say verified pain. We understand the root cause because an RCA was done and it was actually done. And so I always go back to this idea that it's so painful to take the time to do it right. And then the ones that take the time and suffer through doing it right, they're actually exceptional. They're exemplary when it comes to how do you run a facility and maintenance operation so that the machines and the people and the operators can get all that outstanding throughput. You can't, there are no shortcuts. You cannot bypass the steps, and everybody wants to find ways to move faster and better, and that comes back to slowing down.
It does. It comes down to knowing what questions to ask and when to ask them and taking action on the answers. I, you know, there's a lot of times that we'll work with clients and the maintenance folks will say, well, we don't get money to do that. We don't get money to do that. We don't get money to do that. And then when we see a problem like we'll say the printer example I used earlier, and we go back to the plant manager and we articulate it in terms of number of units lost per minute, they go, okay, spend the money because it's a no brainer, spend the money, right?
Yeah.
But and I think you and I have talked about this in the past, maintenance are typically emphatic folks. I know this needs to happen. And because of my expertise, you should just listen to me.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't work that way. And, as much as we would like it to, it just doesn't, right? Not generally speaking. And so I don't know, there's a whole learning experience that has to happen inside of the department of maintenance in a broad sense of how to communicate, what questions to ask to put people in tough spots. Because the same people will go to the morning meeting and go, we had 5 work orders on line 1 and it was down for an hour. And no one in maintenance is going, yeah, I know. And we didn't replace any parts. So why don't you teach your people how to operate the machine right? Like, no one is trying to solve the problem. They're just trying to say someone else is at fault, right? And the more the maintenance department educates themselves, the more armed they are to ask tough questions.
Well,
Like it's designed for 50 a minute. Why are you running it at 40?
this is where we were going to level way the hell up to accountability. And then
Yeah.
there's, the concept of, agency. The 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 people I now know, and many of which I've known in maintenance, any kind of maintenance, just about, the ones that really get it, I say get it. They've been in the trenches. I say it all the time on CMMS radio. That's my whatever. That's the way I like to describe it. I mean a lot by that. And they will take initiative. They will try to figure it out. And if they can, this is a big ask, but if they can say, well, this is just another problem. It's just not a machine. It's a person. It's a department. They could get somewhere with that, right? Like if they really think about it. So um, sometimes people are aggressive, but they're aggressive in a way that's impactful and effective. Good example of that would be Brian Bieski. He'll flat out tell you, hey, I'm aggressive. I'm going to tell you how it is and what it is, but I'll also tell you what needs to happen and why. It
Yeah.
will not lack the context. It's not just bark and you jump. It's, hey, We got to be better. We do this, we do this, we do this. It's going to be better, but I'm going to tell you straight. And it's not going to be a lot of words. Whereas others are going to be articulate and they're going to give you the full recipe and all this, that, and the over the shoulder boulder holder. And then all of a sudden we get this and somebody buys in. You got to manage all that within the maintenance department, within the organization, within the layered structure of an organization. It's why we say the janitor is just as important as the CEO, because this is an entire thing, right?
Yes.
And then if I really want to drive that home for anybody, well, sorry to do this to you, George, but you were at a game on Monday night and the little things matter.
Yeah, no kidding.
It will come down to the wire and the little things matter.
Yeah,
One point difference is a big deal. And
sure.
if you don't do this work, so I don't think the story is going to change. I think what's going to happen is we're going to keep talking about it and try to give people strategies. So I want to throw you a bit of a curveball. We're going to switch sports uh, from football to curveball. I saw something online yesterday. I chimed in on it a little bit, but I want to know if we're allowed to talk about it because you got
It's grayed out a little behind me because I'm not allowed to show it in full. So,
okay. Can't, I
so it's
was thinking
extremely not entirely visible behind me. But
on
I'm going to
purpose.
guess that you're talking about the release of Ramesh Gulati's maintenance and reliability best practices framework, the MRBP framework. Um,
Yes.
yes, we will be releasing that. So Ramesh, obviously the author of maintenance and reliability best practices, and the book has gone through several iterations and expanded in many ways beyond the original in terms of not just context but structure.
Hmm.
And so we have to kind of map things to link up to different scenarios. Like, oh, okay, if we want to talk about how it maps to the SMRP pillars or to some other instances, we're constantly explaining that. Well, we want to stop explaining that. We want to give it its own meat and potatoes. And so Ramesh has worked with us to develop a framework that provides a visual representation of sound operational practices to ensure reliable operation of your plant or facility. And so we have created a framework to wrap all of that around. And the release for that will be at SMRP. We've got Ramesh and I are teaching a workshop, a full day workshop on Monday. I think that's October 7th. Is that right? Is that the Monday? So on, that Monday, if you're heading to SMRP
7th.
and you're signed up for a workshop and it's not the one that says Ramesh and George Williams, cancel that and shift that because you're gonna want to see this. We're gonna walk people through. First, we're gonna explain the framework in really high level, and we're gonna walk people through exactly how to utilize that framework, how to assess your facility, how to prioritize the outcome of that assessment, how to develop an ROI and a strategy for year one implementation. And you're going to do all of that in less than 8 hours inside that workshop. So you are going to take maintenance and reliability best practices. You are going to assess your current facility against those practices to some degree and what we can do within an 8 hour context. You are going to prioritize the gaps. You are going to develop a very high level resource. Here's what it would take to close those gaps, and generally speaking, the ROI to close those gaps, and then develop a strategy out of that. And so everyone will leave with the assessment outcome charts, bubble charts, and whatever they document as their strategy moving forward. Understanding that it is what you can do in 8 hours. We can't do the full 400-point assessment process that we would typically do when we go to a plant, and it takes a week to do that. You're just asking yourself, not 20 other people, and you're only going to see about a third of the questions. So it's a truncated version of it, but it walks everyone through the process. So not only are we releasing the framework, we're immediately adding value and giving people the ability to understand how to assess and develop a strategy. Um, and a path forward for themselves.
And this is what I did not want to attempt to articulate myself at this point, because it's new, it's not really officially released, and that's one of the things. So for anybody that's going to SMRP, George was right. It's going to be on that Monday. That's October 7th. It's a full 8-hour workshop. So I encourage anybody to check that out. And it's not, you know, there's so much out there that people get confused. And what you want to focus in on is you got to make sure that the people that are teaching you and guiding you really have done amazing work and experienced all the problems, and they know where to kind of point you in the right direction to look for those potential problems. And I won't say any more than that. I wanted to get a little bit going on that today because it's kind of fresh in my mind, and when I release this, it gives people an opportunity to have an awareness about it. That's all it really is I want them to be able to experience that. That's an
Thanks.
important annual event, and I think it's important when you guys are presenting that, because I think a lot of people, and anybody that doesn't know, I'm going to say it right now. There's a long history and background when it comes to maintenance and reliability best practices. Ramesh Gulati, George, the whole team at Reliability X, and what they really do. And that's why I talk about it, because of what they really do. And I'm not much on the virtue signaling or any of that kind of stuff. I want to know who's really doing it right, who's real. I'm still trying to figure that out myself. So I imagine for people out there in the world, the maintenance planners, schedulers, reliability engineers that are in charge of facility, I mean, nobody can know everything. So they got to go somewhere where there's been some real results driven. And anybody that knows me knows I'm not just, fucking bullshitting about that. So it's real stuff. It's important to me because I'm always talking about this pursuit of the elusive win-win, and I want the results to be there, because then everybody's allowed to thrive, make money, sing kumbaya, whatever the hell you do, cry together when there's a, field goal at the last minute. I don't know. Hey, I got to take my shots, man. You know me, I'm a Cowboys fan. So,
Yeah,
um,
man. Yeah, man.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
I appreciate the sentiment. Um, Also, we'll have posters of the framework at the event. Ramesh is going to do 2 1-hour book signings during the event, and if you purchase this book, it'll have a copy of the framework inside of it. So we're planning a pretty good release, actually.
Yeah, that'll be cool. That'll be cool. I'm still working it out. Don't know if I'll be there. But I'm talking to a lot of people about it. I want to make sure that I get people to that particular show. I mean, so many people that we know in common are going to be there, and it's really beneficial for the people that attend to go to your workshop, visit with the different vendors, really talk shop, ask people hard questions. I say this about CMMS vendors, by the way, George, and I put something out today. This won't come out like tomorrow, but uh, talking about how all this messaging seems to be the same. Yes, is anybody hearing it? I said no, because I don't see it changing, and my whole point with that is that I want some of these CMMS vendors to kind of step up and come on the podcast and let me ask some of those difficult questions I want potential clients to ask them, and really put them to the test. And it's not to jam them up. It's to have conversations just like this, and let's see what's real,
I
you
What
know?
would be the harm in having like an infrequent kind of like an unboxing, right? Where you get an access to a sandbox and you can put in some records and you can talk about what you like and don't like. Like, what would be the harm in doing reviews, right? Like, that sounds like a no-brainer. Um,
Well, I think
and a great way for them to get some publicity. I guess their fear is you may critique it in a way that they don't like. Well, then do a better job developing your software.
yeah, or hit me up ahead of time and give me
I
some
know, man. Get
insights.
your
'Cause
integrity. You gotta be brutal. You should be brutal. That would be more fun. It ain't gonna be
I
any fun if all you do is say it's like kittens and rainbows. Like,
Well, yeah, I don't want to do that. I want this option where I can say, yeah, I don't like that. Here's why, but you might like it for this or this.
we
Let
did a
me
couple
know.
product reviews, and like if you go to our YouTube channel, there's a thread that's called Reliability Expo,
Mm,
and and we did reviews of one of Iris's tools. We did a review of RDI's tool. We did another review of an old one of the Fluke II 900, I think.
Yeah.
So we had, and they sent us the stuff, right? Like, so I mean, we flew down to Iris, we flew down to Florida, we went to Tennessee to meet up with RDI, and Fluke shipped us the unit, and we shipped it back, like, and we were told them all, like, we didn't allow them to pay for our trip. We didn't allow any of that. If we're going to do a review and you may not like the outcome,
Yeah.
I mean,
You got to draw the
not
line.
like, we're not purposely butchering things or trying to make it a satire. We're giving an honest feedback review on what it is. And I thought that was a great thing to do. And I would have loved to continue to do that. Unfortunately, when we were putting posts out for companies to send us units, there were only a few brave souls. So,
Well, that's why I put the post out today,
yeah,
where I want some people to step up, at least come on the podcast. As far as doing a review of their platform, I mean that's certainly a possibility. I'd be up for it, but I'm also not. I don't necessarily do it that way. Like for me, I've always tried. It's very hard to do. It's very very hard to do. I've tried to occupy both mindsets, and maybe even a third component of that. I don't know what the hell I'm trying to say. I want to make the whole industry better. I want people that are doing it wrong to do it right, but maybe it's a little too harsh for me to say you're doing it wrong, but there's a lot of messaging being missed, and there's a lot of messaging being pushed that's not the right message because there's no specificity. Everybody looks the same, sounds the same. They're doing all the same shit. They're saying all the same
look at
shit,
all
and
the
it's
great
just not.
charts we have.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
great
Oh,
charts aren't fixing any of my equipment.
yeah. It's well, man, as always, George. It's awesome having you on CMMS Radio, and we're going to keep doing this because I know that people are going to get real insights, and whether they want to call that advice or not, call it what you want. We're just here trying to help. We're having real conversations. That's why George is drinking a beer. It's a Friday night for him, and we just wanted to do something good that we can put out there for everybody. And quick reminder, in case this goes out soon enough, you got University of Wisconsin Madison coming up, right?
Yes, sir. 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th, something like that. Let me see if I can figure out October. 21st to the 24th.
Yep. And one of the things I'm excited about in that offering for everyone, and I talk about it, it's the CMMS selection and utilization course. And I think that's important because one, it's CMMS agnostic. So these are principles and frameworks, if you will, on CMMS in general. And I think that's really important that it doesn't, it's not beholden to any particular platform. And these are things that people can actually put into play within their existing organizations, regardless of what you're mandated to use or not. It'll definitely help. And I like that stuff. And we're going to get into that one a little bit more, I think, later this year or next year. I've got some stuff we're going to talk about on that, but we're not going to do
I
it
think
right
that
now.
would be great. Like, I think, all of the conversations we have are fantastic, but to take some of that and chunk it up would be really interesting to have good conversations around.
Well, I think not only would it be good conversation and fun, but we already know that it would help somebody. And
Oh, yeah.
that's kind of my thing. One person at a time is the same as everyone. And man, can't wait till we do this again, George. Thank you so much for being on CMMS Radio. Everybody, it's George Williams. You can find him on LinkedIn, and it's Reliability X, the DNA of success.
Thanks, Greg.
You got it, man. Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS from selection to implementation to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.